Do you know where the fuck you are? You're in my Notcast, baby. You're going to talk about GNR lies. What a terrible pun. Still, I am at the age now, I am a dad, where I have to make dad jokes. It's the law, I'm afraid. Notcast 240. I realised after doing the Appetite for Destruction one for Guns N' Roses on Sunday that I'd massively skimmed over the Lies album and the Appetite for Destruction reissue as well, which came out in 2018. So I think the only fair, honest, and decent thing to do is to talk about those. So I'm going to go roughly chronologically around some of the stuff that isn't Appetite for Destruction. I'm going to go through the Lies EP, Live Like a Suicide, and the Appetite for Destruction Super Mega Deluxe Edition that was issued in 2018. Although it's not obviously this mega super deluxe edition. This is the version that everyone that's not got more money than sense owns. So there you have it. The first Guns N' Roses release in 1986 was the Live Like a Suicide EP, released on a fake label, Uzi Suicide, which was created just for GNR by Geffen Records. I think after they'd signed to Geffen Records, just so they could release a live EP, saying, aren't we this fantastic hip underground band? In fact, when I was talking to my brother the other day, he's still got copies of Kerrang from early 1987 with, I think it's Crash Records in Camden, saying, we've got this new hot LA sleaze band, Guns N' Roses, and their new 12-inch Live Like a Suicide. Get it while it's hot. And you'd write off and you'd get it in the post. £6.99 it was. I think it costs about £120 now if you want to buy it. It's not good enough to spend £120 on Live Like a Suicide, especially when you've got 4 tracks on the Lies EP here. Now, the strange thing about Live Like a Suicide is that the 4 live tracks that are on it aren't live. They were recorded, I think, at Pasha Studios in 1986. And part of that session was produced by a guy called Stephen Proffer. I don't know anything about him. He's probably been interviewed for a GNR podcast or something. And Live Like a Suicide was live in the studio. They then added some fake crowd noise from from one of their own shows, actually, which means that I don't think you can get those studio recordings officially anywhere, although, of course, like a lot of GNR stuff, they are floating around on the internet in low-quality MP3 form, taken from tapes that have been copied off a band member way back when. And the 4 songs that were on Live Like a Suicide, as mentioned before, are Reckless Life, Nice Boys Don't Play Rock and Roll, Move to the City, and Mummakin. And Move to the City, by the way, the only place you could hear a studio version of Move to the City, according to what my record collector brother tells me, is on the soundtrack, but not on the soundtrack album, for I think it's American Ninja 2 or American Ninja 3, which is bizarre. But there's nothing as straightforward in GNR world. And obviously at the time I shared a record collection between me and my brother. He bought the heavier stuff, I bought the not so heavy stuff. Between us we had one fantastic record collection. Separately, I had a fantastic record collection. He had a lot of hair metal, which I've now kind of tried to make up in the meantime. But Live Like a Suicide was legendary. It was like, if one of your friends had a tape of it, and you were like, wow, there's these 4 GNR songs that we haven't heard. The bootleg copies of it, repressings, unofficial repressings, and so on. Now, I think there were copies that were pressed in Greece before Lies got a re-release, and you could go and buy a bootleg vinyl repressing of it, fan club edition or something. But Live Like a Suicide was for me anyway. I only really heard it when I bought Lies. This is not my copy of Lies originally. My original copy of Lies was on a cassette tape of all things. Obviously, cassette is the format which has aged the least well over time. And I should also point out, by the way, that this copy is in fact a remainder deletion cut. So it's got if you can see there, it's got a hole punched through it as a sign that it didn't sell and has been returned. And then no doubt was sold cheaply in the racks of another record store after it had fallen out of the charts. There was this wonderful world of deletions and cutout bins and things where people would import LPs from Greece because or from Brazil or somewhere because they were much cheaper. And if you went there, you could buy the Brazilian version of the album or the Argentinian or the Spanish version of the album for half price, because when you took into account the exchange rates, it worked out at a retail price of maybe £1.74 as opposed to £3.99. And the record shops, or at least some of the record shops, would order them from Spain, pay £1.74 for it, sell it for £4.99 or £3.99 instead of £6.99. If you were budget conscious and you didn't mind too much having a copy with a hole punched through the barcode, you could save yourself £3. Certainly what I did with huge chunks of my record collection when I was growing up, and certainly what the previous owner of this did, although I did buy it relatively recently in the past 10 years or so, because before that I'd only had the copy on CD. So Live Like a Suicide is a studio recording which bullshits you into thinking that it's a live recording when it actually isn't. And the actual studio recordings of these tracks have not yet been officially released, apart from these heavily overdubbed versions. We do have, of course, the Appetite for Destruction reissue, which came out in 2018, but I'll get to that shortly. But what I will do is I'll talk about the period leading up to and around the Lies EP. So, as I said before, Appetite for Destruction, I think it's the biggest selling debut album in American history. Sold, I think, 16 million copies or something ridiculous, maybe 30. The idea of this little band that I liked, and I'm not trying to be a snob about it. I want all the bands I like to be absolutely enormous. I want them to be huge. I want people to love them. I want those bands to be financially successful and secure and to make a good living out of it, because then they make more records, and I love the records. And I'd much rather see a band in a stadium than not at all. If I have to, then I'll see them in a tiny place. And I just think that, if the music does something for me, I don't think I'm that obscure or weird. I'm not into music made by Yugoslavian tractor farmers or something. So I want the music I like. I want everyone to like it, because I think my music taste is amazing. Although obviously it isn't. It's old fuddy-duddy music taste. And so the idea when I bought Appetite for Destruction here back in 1987, it was like a genuinely dangerous band that certainly from the cover all the way down, nobody would like it. And so I think I got into guns about the time of Welcome to the Jungle. Here's your 12-inch, which I mentioned previously, which has an acoustic version of You're Crazy On, which is different. There's the reissue of Sweet Child of Mine on 12-inch with a whole lot of Rosie in it, So Easy, and Move to the City. Now, the strange thing about these were most of the B-sides around about this time were already on the album, so I didn't really buy the singles. I didn't buy the picture discs, I didn't buy the leather packs, I didn't buy the ones with the free tattoos or anything like that, because I was into the B-sides. Maiden, I'd always buy the singles. Metallica, I'd always buy the singles. Guns, not so much, because the B-sides were always on the bloody albums anyway. So, for example, when Patience got a release as a single, it's back with Rocket Queen from the 16 million selling, maybe 30 million now, album Appetite for Destruction. Might have heard of it. So I only got that because it was cheap and affordable, not because I needed the B-side, because I didn't need the B-side, because I already had the B-side on the LP. And with demand for Live Like a Suicide rocketing and going through the roof, the band went into the studio firstly in July 1987 to record One in a Million, You're Crazy, Used to Love Her. They then went back and also added Patience, another version of You're Crazy. And then in April 1988 went back and did some extra mixes and overdubs and added bass and things like that to it, before you got to the final finished version, which became GNR Lies EP. And I skipped over the Lies EP because obviously Appetite for Destruction was a big thing and has a lot of ground to cover. But what I found was that Lies it's obviously, it's not a Guns N' Roses album as such. It reminds me very much of the interim approach of something like Hatful of Hollow by the Smiths. It's kind of like a compilation of previously released and previously unreleased rare and obscure material from this new rising band. that was presented at a budget price and is very clearly presented as something that wasn't a full new GNR album. And the press releases said this isn't the follow-up to Appetite for Destruction. This is just a reissue with some extra songs. And I would have thought, or would have hoped, actually, that Lies would have perhaps been a little bit better. Now, this is not a criticism. I often do a lot of armchair quarterbacking when it comes to running orders for albums, mixes which are chosen, cover art. I do things like, change the CD booklet so that there's a panel from the inside of the CD booklet that I think is better than the actual cover. Do that a lot with Megadeth albums, actually, because I never liked Megadeth artwork. But what you do is I kind of look there. Well, there's quite a few songs which weren't on any albums that were difficult and obscure to get. So there was Shadow of Your Love, for example. You could have put the studio versions of Reckless Life, Nice Boys, Mamakin, those songs on there. Move to the City. They recorded an acoustic version of Move to the City. You could have had something that felt a lot more substantial than GNR Lies actually did. It felt quite flimsy. And it was a necessary step, but it was also at the same point a stopgap. And this came again with the G side, which is the Lies EP, and the R side, the B side being the live stuff. And by the way, if you wanted to know, well, which version do I put? Do I put this side out? Do I put that side out? You've got to do two things when it comes to filing your records. The first one is, what side is the barcode on? It's normally the back. Unless the barcode is a very prominent part of the front artwork, then your barcode goes on the back and the back always faces out. The second one is, where's the spine? So you've got a really kind of strange kind of position where the spine, and if you've got like REM's Fables of the Reconstruction of the Fables, the spine is at the top. So you can choose either side depending on which one you feel like, because the barcode I think is on both sides. So you can choose whichever side you want. But you've got to think about, well, the spine, it goes this way, and then your record tends to go out that way, and the text is always oriented that way, so that's the way that you do it. I suspect this is veering into the boring, so I'll change subject very shortly. And Lies was effectively a 4-track acoustic EP. It featured Patience, Used to Love Her, the re-recorded acoustic version of You're Crazy, different to the version on the Welcome to the Jungle single, and a song called One in a Million. Patience is a lovely acoustic ballad. It was just the right thing, I think, for the band to release at that point, because it was new, and it broke the mould of the classic rock track, in so much as previously the singles which people had heard were, Paradise City, Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child of Mine, all big rock tracks, and then you have Patience come out in this very kind of hollow, gentle acoustic ballad, the type of thing like, I don't know, when the Stones did Wild Horses or something, and suddenly you thought, this isn't just a rock band. Now, they weren't doing the thing of Every Rose Has Its Thorn or anything like that, or Love Bites, which was very obviously the ballad off the rock album. This was a full acoustic thing, and it was lent completely into that, as opposed to going, well, here's the token song for the girls to like, because they already had that with Sweet Child of Mine. And instead you had Patience. Now, I think Patience is a classic GNR song. It's a completely different side to, so, for example, if Appetite for Destruction is outward facing, and it was angry and furious at the state of the world, then Lies is quite inwards, and it's quite flippant and quite light. But it's a classic GNR track. And then we have Used to Love Her. Now, Used to Love Her is controversial. And it's controversial because, of course, the lyric goes, I used to love her, but I had to kill her. I had to put her 6 feet under. And if you took that song seriously, like if you took parts of Appetite for Destruction seriously, I think you'd have been a lost cause. There's a huge element of sarcasm, flippancy, and just silliness, really, which actually has been in a number of GNR tracks all the way through. Things like Live and Let Die, for example. They know they're a bit daft when they do the Gimme Some Reggae section in Knocking on Heaven's Door. I don't think they should. I don't think anyone took that bit seriously. In fact, there's a 10-hour video of the Gimme Some Reggae section on YouTube. But what you'd have is, the band leaning into an element of the flippant and the silly, which with Used to Love Her, if you took it deadly seriously, I think you'd have to go, look, are you okay? Because you can't tell when a band's not being 100% serious. When REM did Superman, for example, the cover of Superman, I think you'd go, they're just playing a daft song that they love, and Used to Love Her is not meant to be taken seriously. Now, you could argue, I think you'd be wrong to do it, you'd be arguing that there's some misanthropy and some misogyny in that song, whereas actually the main offender on the album is the absolutely terrible, risible, inexplicable, and undefendable One in a Million, which, even if it is a song sung in the voice of somebody that Axl isn't, it doesn't make it clear enough that the attitudes that that song is espousing are horrific and garbage. Now, when I listened to it as a 15-year-old, I listened to the R side. Here's the inner sleeve for One in a Million, and just listening to it, I thought, really, that's what you're doing? You're going to go and do a lyric like that? And the answer was yes, they were. And obviously there is a reason why One in a Million is not on the super mega sets of Appetite for Destruction, because it is an awful song that's irredeemable. It has no positive qualities whatsoever. The lyrics, even if they're spoken in quotation marks, are so terribly racist and homophobic that they are absolutely indefensible, even if you use the defence that those lyrics are there to try and expose the terribleness of other people's attitudes, because there's not much judgment that's attached to the actual lyrics themselves. And of course the parody is, if it looks and speaks and quacks like a duck, it might be a duck. So I'm very proud to say I never listened to One in a Million as a song. I listened to it for the first time in probably 20 years last week, and I was horrified. I was like, I don't remember it being this bad. I remembered it being pretty bad, but then I listened to it and I'm like, oh man, this is a song that should never have been recorded. Now, I'm not one for censorship or for saying to people that, oh, you can't do what you want to do or you can't say what you want to say, but we live in an age of consequences, and we live in an age where if you come out with a bad opinion or you say something awful, people can very easily articulate that that in itself is not acceptable, and that lyric is vile. Even if the liner notes on the front here have said, ever been unjustly hassled by someone with a gun and a badge, or been conned, or had someone attempt to sell you stolen property and they won't take no for an answer, been to a gas store and been treated like you don't belong here by an individual who can barely speak English. Oh, not good. Hopefully not. Have you ever been attacked by, oh god, man. This song is very simple and extremely generic, or generalised. My apologies to those who may take offence. Yeah, well, I hate that song, and I certainly completely understand why it's been written out of history. It's really bad, indeed. I mean, it's not like, where Morrissey does the albums and he changes the track listings and he takes some of the best tracks off. It's just, there was nothing redeeming. At the time I listened to it, I'm like, really? Wow, you're doing that. So, One in a Million, terrible Guns N' Roses song. And I'm embarrassed that it was ever recorded or released. But luckily, that's not me, because it's not on the reissue, so I can pretend it wasn't there. Lloyd's got a CD issue. Here it is. If you have the Super Deluxe expanded version of Appetite for Destruction, you don't need this, unless you need One in a Million. You don't need One in a Million. And as I said before, Alan Niven was very keen on ensuring that there were specific and limited releases that were exclusive to certain countries, this being the Live from the Jungle EP, which was only released in Japan. Effectively, it's a Sweet Child of Mine CD single backed with a couple of different live tracks, and it's very good indeed. And then, of course, here's Appetite for Destruction in its revised sleeve. So, let's go to the Appetite for Destruction Super Deluxe Edition. As I've mentioned before, now, the Super Deluxe Edition is not the Locked and Loaded set. The Locked and Loaded set is an absurd rip-off with a retail price of £1,000, 12 LPs. I think it's got, well, maybe it's got only 7 LPs. Far too many LPs, anyway. And it's got 12 coloured 7-inch singles, and comes in a wooden crate that weighs more than your house, that type of thing. The slightly more affordable edition, which now, as I said, is $49.99 from Amazon, assuming you can find a decent copy on sale, has 5 discs in it, being 4 CDs and a Blu-ray. And the 4 CDs are Appetite for Destruction, Lies and B-sides and EPs. Then 2 discs of the Sound City sessions, and then the last one is a Blu-ray. And the Blu-ray has a 5.1 surround sound mix of Appetite for Destruction. It has 5 bonus tracks: Shadow of Your Love, Patience, Used to Love Her, You're Crazy, and the acoustic version of Move to the City. And 5 music videos for Welcome to the Jungle, Sweet Child of Mine, Paradise City, Patience, and It's So Easy. It also has some memorabilia in it. So let's go through the memorabilia. It has a postcard of the part of the artwork of the original cover, which was an artwork by Robert Williams called Appetite for Destruction. It's got some fake tickets for gigs you will never be able to go to. The Troubadour, where's this now? I don't know, somewhere or other. Another gig there. The Entertainment Centre, which looks to be in Adelaide, I think, although I could be wrong. 17th of December 1988. Again, some bullshit fake tattoos which you should absolutely never use. The Welcome to the Jungle flyer, there it is. Photographs of people who are now mostly quite rich, before they got quite rich. Waxel, the Slash, here's the Duff, King of the Beers, who I suspect may have given his name, or more correctly the name Duff, may have inspired the name of the Simpsons beer, Duff Beer. Izzy, half man, half beast, and Steve Popcorn Adler, an underrated drummer, indeed. And then we've got some posters. One of the posters is I think it's a lithograph of the cover. Now that artwork is called Appetite for Destruction. It's quite rude, and I won't dwell on it too much. But what it does do is, if we focus on the top half of it, for example, the bottom half depicts a sexual assault, but the top half depicts the consequences of that, the revenge that will inevitably happen. And here is a poster of some guys in a band, whoever they are. It all comes in some fancy envelope. You don't need it. It's expensive memorabilia. The kind of stuff that if you bought a stupid expensive meet and greet package with a band, or a deluxe thing, or a gold premium platinum something, they'd give it you as a bit of extra swag. And you go, oh, I've got a bit of extra swag. But your extra swag don't count for shit. So we go into the book. The book is, I think it's 92 pages of photographs from Axel's collection, all the way through from the very start of the band. Very little in the way of explanatory text, but reproductions of old press sheets and gig posters and flyers and photos and things like that. Now, the strange thing is, to me, it seems really weird seeing this in a box set, because I kind of remember some of these adverts being in Kerrang and Raw magazine, some of the concerts which are mentioned on here, like the Rich Show, being broadcast on local radio, WMFM, or the BBC Metal Night in 1988 that changed 1,000 million lives in the UK when they broadcast GNR at the Ritz, Led Zeppelin in Denmark, Metallica and Slayer at the Hammersmith Odeon. I think did they show anything else? I don't know. And then later on, of course, the classic British documentary In Bed with Chris Needham, which was broadcast in 1992, which, if you haven't seen it, is an essential part of understanding Britain's metal culture in the 80s and the 90s. And I will post a link to it if it's on YouTube, because it's essential watching as some guy tries to form a band that's absolutely terrible and become famous and doesn't succeed. There's the Welcome to the Jungle flyer, a copy of which is attached separately. Here's some more press releases and some more bits and bobs for the band. Now, the Appetite for Destruction Super Mega Duper expanded edition, although it isn't perhaps quite as super mega as the Locked and Loaded set, comes on 4 CDs and a Blu-ray, which I've mentioned. Discs 3 and 4 are the real things that you need to get through these. These are the Sound City sessions from 1986. So these are the first full-length studio recordings by Guns N' Roses. There are 2 studio recordings before that. One, of course, was the Mystic Studios demo tape, which is available in the Locked and Loaded set. The other one is the Pasha Studios, which has about 13 or 14 songs on, and features the pre-overdubbed versions of the songs that later appeared on the Live Like a Suicide EP. The Sound City Studio sessions are effectively a dry run for the LP, and it's a recording of almost all of the LP, plus a number of extra songs recorded in the studio. Now, when the band went into the studio to record Appetite for Destruction itself, the initial idea was maybe they'd work with Bill Price, with some sessions in London in 1987. Bill Price was chosen because he produced Nevermind the Bollocks, which is quite a good album, by the way. Although I've not passed any comment on Sex Pistols or Pill previously in the Notcasts. Sex Pistols, quite good, although obviously what's happened to them since they split up has been the usual faction of wars and infighting. And what we did see all the way through this period was around how guns became, whether anybody wanted to, it moved slowly through this period from being a band and a gang and 5 guys against the world to 1 or 2 or 3 guys against the world, and a couple of extra guys who to varying degrees had started to lose interest or capability in the band. Stephen was, as I understand it, according to his book, My Appetite for Destruction, quite good at taking drugs and had plenty of experience of it, and that was affecting his playing, which he also broke his wrist, and Fred Corey from, I think, is it Cinderella or somebody like that, played drums for a tour as well. So the idea of being absolutely indispensable was thrown out of the window at that point. We also had Izzy on guitar, who was slowly starting to detach himself away from the madness, really. The concept being that, well, if you vote for a clown, you end up with a circus. And that's about as much about British politics as I want to talk about right now. These are some posters for an advert for Paradise City, which, putting technically, was formatted to bollocks. There's a limited edition gun-shaped picture disc for all your gun-shaped picture disc needs. There it is. There's a 7-inch with a free tattoo. There's a 12-inch. And then there's another single. And then here's the GNR Lies era, the period which officially I'm talking about right now in the book, where we start moving swiftly on. So we've got some posters for the very, very kind of last few shows of the tour. The Patient single, which came out on June the 26th, 1989, about 6 months after anything else. And then September 1989, the very last gasp of the Appetite for Destruction era, the Night Train single with a 7-inch with a free patch, a gun thingy shaped picture disc, a faux leather satchel, a 10-inch, God knows what else. Load of rubbish. I didn't buy any of this stuff. I probably should have done, but I've never listened to it because picture discs sounded terrible at that point. And then, of course, here's the discs themselves. This is the bit that if you're into it, everything else is just packaging. What's on these 5 discs is what really, really matters if you're a fan of the band. Is this any good? Well, the 5.1 mix is pretty spiffy. You'll have heard almost everything from the other versions. What you won't have is the Sound City Sessions, and as I've mentioned before, the Sound City Sessions covers 2 CDs, and that's a total of 27 tracks. Apparently they're all previously unreleased, which is correct. It's not everything that was recorded during the Sound City Sessions. There's a couple of omissions, which I'll get to. But we have Welcome to the Jungle, Night Train, Out to Get Me, Paradise City, My Michelle, Think About You, You're Crazy, Anything Goes, Rocket Queen. So that's the 10 songs from the album. So you haven't got It's So Easy, and you haven't got Mr. Brownstone, and you haven't got the Alan Niven mix of Mr. Brownstone either, which is inexplicable and I don't understand it. You've then got Shadow of Your Love, which was on the B-side of It's So Easy, the previously unreleased Heartbreak Hotel, and Jumpin' Jack Flash. And then you've got a second set of sessions. You've got Shadow of Your Love, Move to the City, the studio version of that. You've got Ain't Going Down No More, which was re-recorded and used for a GNR pinball machine in the 90s as Ain't Going Down. A track no one's ever heard of before called The Plague. You've got a studio version of Nice Boys, not the same version that's on Lies. You've got a demo of Back Off Bitch, which appears on Use Your Illusion. You've got studio versions of Reckless Life and Mamakin, a track called New Work Tune that I've listened to and is utterly forgettable. You've got a piano version of November Rain, and then you've got some extra acoustic tracks as well. So you've got Move to the City, another version of You're Crazy, presumably the same one that's on the 12-inch, an acoustic version of November Rain, and acoustic versions of Jumping Jack Flash and Move to the City again. So you've got a second acoustic version of Move to the City, presumably recorded for the Lies EP, but not actually used. What you don't have on the box set is, that although this is one version, every track on here is at least one version of almost every track that was demoed apart from the Pasha sessions. What you don't have is that there was a second take of Out to Get Me, 2 extra versions of Shadow of Your Love and Nice Boys, and I think there was a demo of Rocket Queen, and there was also a recording of Don't Cry, which Don't Cry is not on there, and Don't Cry is not on the Use Your Illusion set that's coming shortly. Don't Cry, the demo with Stephen on drums, is only on the Don't Cry CD and 12-inch from 1991, which has the original version, the updated lyrics version, and the demo of Don't Cry on there. So if you want to get the demo of Don't Cry, the only place to get it at the moment is on this CD single, which is now 31 years old, which is also, I think, the only song recorded by the Adler era that you can't get in some form on the Use Your Illusion set. Sorry, on the Appetite for Destruction set. Right, all complaints, and get a refund for this episode because of the huge factual error I just made there. What we don't have also, by the way, some songs that were written by the band but weren't recorded at the time. Yesterday's, You Could Be Mine, The Garden, Dust and Bones, Civil War, and an early version of Pretty Tied Up were recorded and ready, or more correctly, were ready around about this time, but the band never recorded them. The band were holding back tracks for the second and third albums, much the same way that Oasis and Jesus Jones did exactly the same thing. Oasis's All Around the World, for example, was written before the band had played, or before the band had released their first single. Jesus Jones had some tracks that weren't released, that were ready, written in their very early years, that weren't released until several years later, when the band had evolved a little bit, because they thought maybe it was a bit too advanced for LP number one. Guns had the same thing. What they had with Appetite for Destruction, which I think is something which is very underrated, is they were very, very good at sequencing. So they chose an absolutely perfect balance and construction for the album. The song started and ended in the right places. The tempo was correct. The songs worked perfectly. Some of them, Anything Goes and, Think About You may not have been the best songs that they had. If you think about, if you've got November Rain and Yesterdays and You Could Be Mine and Don't Cry, objectively I can look at those songs and go, those songs are probably better than Anything Goes or Think About You, but they didn't fit on the LP. They wouldn't have made the LP. They were holding back some of the big guns for the second LP because they thought, you guys aren't ready for that yet. And they had a number of other songs that they'd played live, Good Night Tonight, for example, which they never recorded. I think there's a circulating version of Good Night Tonight, and it's quite good, but it's not finished. And you kind of think, you had the gem, the kernel of a great song there that never grew into anything bigger. There's also, by the way, obviously the Pasha demos, which I've mentioned, and there are demo recordings of Sweet Child of Mine, which aren't on here, and some of the other songs that they recorded as well, which I personally, if I was, let's armchair quarterback for a minute, what would I have done differently with this set? Of course I would have put the Ritz on there. I'd have put Ritz on there on Blu-ray, and I'd have put it there on CD. I'd have put the Marquee on there. I'd have put the Pasha Studio Session. CDs are cheap. They cost about £1 to manufacture. And then instead of looking at a 5-disc set, you'd be looking at an 8-disc set, and your actual cost of production would have gone up by a whole £3. And it would have been a far more tempting proposition for the original £144 retail price if you had 8 CDs in, or more correctly, 8 CDs and 2 Blu-rays, as opposed to 4 CDs and a Blu-ray. If you're looking at a 9-disc set as opposed to a 5-disc set. But Guns have never been the most prolific of bands. As we know, those 18 years or 17 years between Use Your Illusion and Chinese Democracy were a very, very long time indeed. I lived every one of those years. But no, that's what you have, Sound City on there. So if you are going to buy any version of Appetite for Destruction and you are a completist, this is the job to get. It will take plenty of space on your shelf and plenty of space in your ears, and the Sound City recordings are remastered and mixed wonderfully from the original tapes. Really love it. Really great version of a reissue. Not definitive, because obviously I've mentioned some missing tracks, but very, very good indeed. The only other release from this period is the Record Store Day 2018 single, as mentioned before, Shadow of Your Love, mixed by Chris Lord Alge in February 2018, although recorded at Rumbo Recorders in 1986, and backed with the acoustic version of Move to the City was a red vinyl 7-inch single. Not the last GNR single, but the first one for quite a while. The first GNR single for 9 years was Shadow of Your Love. I gotta be honest, everybody loves a bit of coloured vinyl. If you don't, well, that's up to you, isn't it? Really, I do look at black vinyl these days and go, yeah, black's a colour. You say it's black coloured vinyl? In fact, sometimes your black coloured vinyl is rarer than any other colour, which is bizarre when you think about it, but isn't everything bizarre at the moment? But no, there you are, Shadow of Your Love. So, after that, I'm going to wrap up with just telling you a little bit about what happened in the world of GNR since then. The Appetite for Destruction period saw the end of that period, and this is detailed more in Stephen Adler's book, Appetite for Destruction, than anybody else's, but it's also detailed in Duff's It's So Easy and Other Lies, the Slash book, and the probably controversial Last of the Giants by Mick Wall, which is more objective, I think, although not necessarily always particularly true. Because obviously there are three sides to any story: yours, mine, and the truth. And as I've thought about the passing of time, there are things that I remember quite clearly that actually, when I think about the recordings that exist from that period, the live shows or the live tapes or the VHS tapes that people have put on YouTube, I'm watching things that I've been to, especially during lockdown, and I've been watching shows that I experienced, and I was kind of going, my memory's wrong. My memory's different of this. My memory tells me something else happened. And it's only really when you're able to go back and check the footage and you go, oh, so that's what really happened, as opposed to what I experienced on that given night, which was completely different. And I'm sure that there are some things that were experienced by Steve, which were experienced very, very differently by Duff and Slash. And obviously you've got autobiographies written by 3 of the 5 guys that were in the room. What we did have, and it was very, very clear, and it comes through all the way through all of the books, is that we had a determination and a singular artistic vision, which was, a combined one that was shared by 5 individuals, but led ultimately by Axel. And the idea was about bending reality to your will through determination and stubbornness alone. I think people were discarded along the way, including, of course, Stephen, who had some performance issues, and his main instrument probably became drugs for a period of time. We had almost an element of, I think, probably the best way to describe it is a power trip. And every band needs somebody that's obsessed with the band, that is the leading, guiding person. It's not just a job to them. They live and breathe it. This is their life. Metallica have Lars, Guns have Axel. Suede have Brett Anderson. Although actually most of them seem very keen to be in that band. The Manics had Richie, somebody that drives them and sees a point in the future and goes, we're going there, we're doing that, that's where we're going. And that's where what we had with Guns is that Axel took his vision and his determination and his persistence and became almost the essential cog at the heart of the situation. Now you can argue that there was a power trip element of that, but obviously, if you're a singer, hang on a second, I'm going to let the cat in. Cat's in now, you won't be able to hear him moan. But if you're the single person that's driving that band, you go, this is my escape route out of mediocrity, out of poverty, out of a lack of achievement, out of being held by your dad when you're not in the mood, for example. You've got that kind of situation where if you're obsessed with that band, that's your thing, that's the thing that you do. And then therefore that's how it operates. And so sorry, I've got to stroke his ears, he likes that. that was what I think was happening at that point, is that Axel became the person that kind of realised, actually, if I don't cooperate, then nothing happens. I become the focal point of that. And if you're the kind of person that doesn't respond well to authority structures, if you're the kind of person that doesn't respond well to being given orders or direction, if you're somebody that wants to work in a more collaborative, collegiate way, as opposed to an authoritarian top-down structure, then you will really, really struggle with things like, you have to be here at this time to get this bus, to get that flight plane, to get on that stage, to be at that point in history. And what you can see is, and I don't think it's necessarily malicious, it's more that some people can't fake it. Some people can't get on stage and pretend they're having the best days of their life when they're not. I've seen New Order. I've seen them be amazing. I've seen them be awful. I've seen them be both in the same hour. And I think with Guns at that point, the element of showmanship hadn't yet switched on. It's more, this is my thing, my passion, my belief. Having complete artistic control, complete creative control, having complete ability to define the boundaries of what you do and how you do it. Or as the t-shirt that Guns sold in 2002 said, freedom through musical integrity. When you have that power and that strength, is that you hold on to it with very tight hands, because people will be very happy to take that away from you if you give them the opportunity to do so. And sometimes I look at when bands are on stage and I kind of think, if you're not feeling it, don't do it. Because if you're paying to 1,000 people or 10,000 people or 100,000 people, most of those 100,000 people that were there would love to be that person, would love to be playing guitar if they had the ability to do it, or would love to sing, or would have that moment. And you should only do it when you feel it, and when it's right, and when it's accurate. And at the same point, you need to respect the audience and have a contract with the audience around, okay, so you're having an evening with this band, and an experience of what that is with this band. But at the same point, there is a social contract around expectations and what is expected for you to deliver. And it's not a jukebox. You don't press 9 and get the Elmer Dinkley joke. That's not how it works. But if you wanted a regular 9 to 5 job, you wouldn't go into music. The music, the money now is probably awful. It's really tough. The margins are really tight. If you do it, you do it because that's what you've got to do. And as an audience member or somebody that buys records, if I hear or see a band and I think they're not really interested in this, it's just another day at the office, I can then kind of think, what is the point of me putting down, my money and my time, the time that I don't have to be here, if the artist doesn't want to be here? It's a difficult position to be in. Not everybody enjoys it. But as the song Prostitute by Guns N' Roses says on the Chinese Democracy album, it says, why would I prostitute myself for fortune and fame? Which is probably one of the most telling lyrics in that particular album. And when we get to Chinese Democracy, I have a lot to say about that record. It is a masterpiece. Although I'm well aware I may be the only person on the planet, apart from Axel, that actually thinks that. I think it's the best Guns N' Roses album. And yes, that is a hill I will die on. Please don't actually kill me. I quite like being alive. But if I need to die on that hill, that is a hill I will die on. I think Chinese Democracy is the best Guns N' Roses album. Yeah, I'm a contrary old bugger. Let's hug it out. So that brings Lies and Live Like a Suicide and Appetite for Destruction, the super mega expanded 2018 version, to a close. I wasn't expecting to do a second one. I was expecting the next GNR one to be Use Your Illusions, but that comes out next month, I think, as a reissue, and I will not have that reissue because I don't think £270 for 7 CDs and a Blu-ray with 2 live shows and 2 studio albums and a Blu-ray of a new live show is good value for money. I am not, despite what some people that worked in the band organisation have once said about their fans, clueless. I have a pretty good idea of what constitutes value for money, and the Use Your Illusion set ain't it? So, in fact, neither was the original retail price for this Appetite for Destruction set. At a £49.99 retail price, this is really good value. At £150, absolutely not. But patience is a virtue and it rewards those who wait. So, I will wrap up here. And next time I see you, God knows what I'm going to be talking about. It might be Tin Machine 2. Aren't you lucky? All old music that's very old indeed, as discussed by a very old man talking to his phone. Okay, see you later. Stay beautiful. Don't forget to subscribe. I'm sure I'll think something to put down in the comments, say you've got some associated videos or something to watch. And in the meantime, take care of yourselves and each other. Adios, amigos. Bye.